Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to start now and run through till 4:15. We'll stop after Angus and Heather have both given their sort of presentations for a bit of a discussion and take any questions you have at that point. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. This webinar is being recorded, kind of for the legacy output. Um, if at any point you do want to ask a question, please just pop it in the chat and we'll take all the questions at the end. We'll probably invite everyone just to come in, unmute, and ask their question themselves. But up to that point, if you could please just keep yourself on mute, that would be fantastic. So this webinar is being run through the Scottish Agroecology Partnership. Scottish Agroecology Partnership is a collaboration of 8 organisations which are rapidly becoming a voice for agroecology in Scotland. The aim is to make agroecology central to farming, as Angus and Heather have just been discussing before you all came on. This is a formal partnership which is made up of Soil Association, Landworkers Alliance, Food Farming Countryside Commission, Nature Friendly Farming Network, Pasture for Life Propagate, Nourish Scotland, and the Scottish Crofting Federation. The organisation the partnership rather, formed after delivering CATIV projects successfully for the past sort of 4 or 5 years. So it just made sense to sort of formalise our joint effort to have a greater impact within Scottish agriculture. So this programme that we're running this year through CATIV funding, which is supported by the Scottish Government, the key objective is to increase farmers, crofters and growers' understanding of agroecological and organic practices, building their confidence to implement them. This is building on the feedback of recent programmes, and the project meets a demand for content on improving farm resilience, soil health, biodiversity and progress towards net zero. Through peer-to-peer networks and a suite of multi-format learning materials, the programme aims to foster ongoing learning beyond its duration, hence why we are recording today and why it's so good to get the input of brilliant practitioners like Heather and Angus. So we're going to run through the presentation. Heather's going to go first and then Angus, both showing some images of their farming decisions over the past I think, Heather, some of your photos are about past 5 years, but
Yeah, 5, 6 years, some of mine.
yeah, but informing kind of the decisions you make to get to where you are now, I guess.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So without further ado, I'll just pass over to you, Heather, and kick off.
Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Close. I know some of you. I farm with my dad, Philip, who is also on this call, and my sister, Joanne. We farm in South Ayrshire, right on the coast. We're between Turnberry and Girvan, if you know that, about an hour south of Glasgow. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the farm and the herd and myself first, and then I'll explain how the variability in the weather has affected how I farm, how I plan the grazing. So the farm is 136 hectares overall. About 117 of that is pasture, and the remainder is woodland and building. The soil is deep, it's glacial till. Clay percentage is about 22% over the farm. The fields right by the sea are sandier. The ones further inland are a bit siltier. Haven't used artificial fertilizer since 2018. It could even be 2017. The land rises from about 40 meters above sea level to 145. Our 30-year average rainfall is just under 1.1 meters. But as you'd expect from an average, that can vary quite a lot from year to year, and we'll discuss that a bit more later. We have cows. The herd is made up of between 40 and 50 cows. This year we have 44 that are about to start calving in 2 or 3 weeks. They are a mixture of modern Angus, which has been selected over the last 15 to 20 years to suit this system. Some native Angus and some traditional type Herefords. All of our animals are outwintered. We calve in spring, so from mid-April for 6 or 7 weeks. The calves are weaned in February, so the cows carry the calves over winter. We breed our own bulls. All animals are certified pasture for life, including the bulls. They don't get any special treatment. Actually, can you put the next slide on, Jamie? Please. Yeah, so that's one of our big bulls there. We've still got him a couple of years later. So he's in there with the cows, outwintered, silage, grass, nothing special. And we generally move the cows to fresh grass daily. And in winter, it can be 2 to 3 times a day. So a little bit about me. As I said, I'm Heather. I moved up to the farm in May 2019. Mum and Dad bought the farm when I was at university. So Dad is the only one in the family who was actually brought up on a farm. Prior to that, I worked in engineering and project management. I'd helped out on the farm a little bit, a few weeks at a time, but I was very much a novice come 2019. But I love it. So yeah, as Jamie said, I'm not going to talk about the last year. I'm going to talk about, we had a brilliant year last year. And unlike most of the rest of the country, we had more sunshine than I think I've ever seen on the west coast of Scotland before. So that wouldn't be very interesting for you all. So I'm going to talk about the first 2 years when I really started planning the grazing. So that would be 2020 is the first year. This was wet. Can you do the next slide, please, Jamie? That was me for 6 months. It just rained constantly. And then the next slide, please. We had 275 millimeters of rain in that February, which is 3.5 times our monthly average. And it doesn't look that bad there, but bear in mind those brown patches are about 300 meters away. And it was slippy, it was slimy, the quad bite was skiting. It was really horrible rain. And this was one of our sandier beach fields. You can see it's right towards the sea. Now, I think the ground is soft, and I'd be interested to know if Angus's ground gets soft in February normally. But come February, even when we don't have that much rain, we've only had 50 mil or so this February, but the ground is still really soft. This is obviously exceptional with the 275 mil, but February is soft anyway, and that rain on top was an awful lot. Yeah, I'm still traumatized by it. So what I learned from that though, so it was in a way it's helpful to have that experience at the start of my grazing. So I'm always prepared for bouts of heavy rain, even though the 275 mil in 4 weeks is unusual. It's quite normal for us to have 200 mil in 4 weeks, at least once over the winter, sometimes twice. And by the end of that 4 weeks, you're sick of it, completely sick of it. So it was a harsh lesson, but a useful one. Long grass is your friend. So you can see these are the weaned calves here, and the grass there is reasonably long. Even though it flops over in autumn and it looks like it's all disappeared, it's not, it's there. The volume is still there, it's just compressed. And that helps protect the earth as well as feed the cows. I increase the paddock size where necessary now. So when I'm planning for our herd, I kind of work out over the winter about 3 days a hectare. But I know that if it's wet, we might go down to 2 days a hectare. And if it's dry, we might be lucky enough to get 4 days a hectare. So I do vary the grazing depending on how wet or dry it is. We also move the cows more than once a day. We kind of start off with 3 times a day. We use in the winter. We use automatic gates called back latches. And then kind of when it gets a bit wetter, we end up with 2 times a day. But the reason for this is that as soon as the cows get into the field, as you can imagine, and you probably experienced yourself, they trample down the grass and that quickly becomes unpalatable. So by moving them 2 or 3 times a day, that gives them a good chance at the fresh grass, so their bellies do get fuller. We provide a run back to a hedgerow or shelter belt where possible. You don't have to worry about the grass regrowing. It's February, it's not doing much now. And it's important that the cows have some shelter, and also they have a wider area to stand over. The bigger area they have, the less damage they will do to the ground. And then the grass will always recover. I do have some horrible muddy photos, but not of this February, but I actually have a sequence of photos as the grass recovered over a few months. And it's amazing. It will come back. The way we graze, we tend not to graze. We have 3 to 6 month rest periods between grazings, and that's plenty of time for the grass to come back. 6 weeks might not be, but I will graze it as normal in the summer, generally, unless it's showing signs that it's not ready. That has not happened so far. But then in the winter, if a field's had a really hard winter the winter before, I will try and graze that earlier in the winter when the ground's more likely to be less wet, to give it an easier ride, hopefully. Obviously, you can never predict the weather, but that's my aim. So if it had a hard winter last winter, I'll try and help it have an easier one next winter. And then there's also the benefit of the adaptive multi-paddock grazing means that you're moving your paddocks all the time. So the chances of that same paddock having that same amount of rainfall the next winter is really quite low. So I don't remember us having that same impact happening the next year or the year after. That's nature hates it when the same thing happens at the same time over and over again. So AMP grazing does help you with that. The next photo, please, Jamie. So this is just the comparison. So this is summer, a wet summer. So this is the same year, but further on. And we had 400 mil over 8 weeks. So basically 50 mil a week for 8 weeks. And this was the grass there. As you can see, there's lots of grass. There's no damage to the ground. This was actually really quite high density grazing we were doing here. So that's just to show it does matter when the rainfall happens. In the summer, it might not be pleasant, but it's has far less impact. It's being used by the grass and the other plants. It's evaporating. In winter, it's a different kettle of fish. So the next one then, please, Jamie. Quick drink. We went from the wettest winter, well, the wettest year, to the driest year that I've had. So this is 2021, which I think was the year before most of the rest of the country had a really dry summer. And talking to my pals on the east, they didn't think it was particularly dry, but for us, it was dry. So we had 75% of our annual rainfall. April, we had no rain. August, we had no rain. And July, we had no rain. And this photo is taken at the beginning of August. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the bit at the front has been grazed and the field on the right has been grazed. But the grass just kind of, and the 1/3 into the photo, you can see there's the seed heads at the top. There's the grazed grass in front of it, but there's a nice strip of bright green grass underneath the seed heads. So that was still damp, even when we hadn't had rain. That was still managing to catch the dew, and the grass was growing with that little bit there. So this was accidental. We were experimenting with non-selective grazing at the time. So I knew we had 3 or 4 months grazing in front of us. This was in August, so I couldn't see us not getting rain by the end of October. Obviously, things are changing, and I know down in England they've had some really long periods without rain. But I felt that this worked quite well because I knew we had that stockpile of grass ahead of us. We were grazing quite slowly because we were grazing non-selectively. I'm not sure I'd recommend it as an option, but it was useful at the time, and we do use it for short periods now. What I would say is I would advise against non-selective grazing in the winter because you will just make a mess if you get the rainfall that we've had. And then the next photo, Jamie. So this was actually I think the text there is a bit wrong. This was actually a field that had been grazed. So you can see it's been grazed reasonably hard, not that hard. There's still green there. There's brown matter on the ground. But I wasn't confident with the way we were grazing that if we got any rainfall soon, that it would be recovered in, say, 6 weeks to go round again. So that's another reason for the higher density grazing and the really long rest periods. I know that whenever the rain comes, that's going to spring back up, but I'm not going to be worrying about it happening in the next 6 weeks. So, and also because all of our stock are outside, and the winter stockpile is the most important thing. We think about that all year. I didn't want to compromise the winter stockpile by grazing it too quickly when it hadn't recovered after our dry spell. So I think so we had the wettest year, we've had the driest year. My first 2 years managing the grazing. And then, so both of those affected the spring grass growth in different ways. The next photo, Jamie, please. And where, like in the West Coast, it can be the grass can stop growing because it's too wet, because it's too dry, it's too cold. Sometimes we just don't have any sunshine. I've yet to have a problem with it being too hot, but in some places that can happen. So what I do now, kind of as a result of those first two springs, when I have memories of chasing grass round grazing fields earlier than I would have chosen to, is I hold the cows back a bit until I know we have a really good wedge ahead of us. And then if we don't get rain for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or however long, I know we have a good 3-4 month, maybe even 5 month stockpile ahead of us. And bear in mind, this is all context specific. We're quite like we're stocked for our winter carrying capacity rather than our summer carrying capacity. And because we calve in April, I tend to wait till most of the calves are up and running around and they've been we know they're all healthy and the mums are doing fine. So kind of towards the middle of May to the end of May, I'll hold them back a wee bit till I'm sure we've got the grass ahead of us, and then I'll let them go and we'll start skimming paddocks. If you calve earlier or if you calve later, you might choose to tweak that a bit. But I think there's an awful lot to be said. I know the grass starts growing a little bit in March and in April, and in May it begins to start picking up, but you need a good 2 or 3 weeks after the grass is growing for it to be there in full volume and to know you can graze it and come back to it. So that's one of the key lessons from me. And then the next photo, Jamie. And this is June, where we've got all the grass, you've held the cows back, and now you don't have to worry about planning it for a little while. You can just let them have the grass. That was probably 50-ish animals on 1 hectare, whereas in the winter, as I said, we'd be 50-ish animals on a third of a hectare most days. And then that's where we all want to be. And then the next photo is this is just our rainfall, which we can talk about later maybe if we have time. But you can see that February really stands out, and that July was also wet, like that summer was wet. But we normally have a drier spring, not happened yet, still waiting for it. March, April, May tends to dry out. And then in the winter, it says about 100 mil average, and that will be 1 or 2 months, which might be close to 200 or over 150 at least. And then some that are a little bit lower, but yeah, it varies which months they are, but that's the general shape of our rainfall. So I think that's from me. Is that everything?
Yep, perfect. That's all your photos, Heather. Great, thanks very much.
So
we can come back to some photos later on. I think we'll have time.
Yeah.
But we'll just pass over to Angus now.
All good. Hi guys. So I'm Angus Walton. I farm with my folks and my wife at Peelham Farm on the east coast, the other side of Scotland, where we have experienced a very different, almost back to front season. I'm going to talk about a bit about the farm history, about what we do here, and then I'm going to talk about the last 12 months, which has been a roller coaster down here on the southeast coast. So we are organic, Pasture for Life certified. We farm now just over 500 acres. We are very similar to Heather. We're probably a couple of miles crow flies from the North Sea. We farm at around about an average of probably 500 feet, peaking at sort of high 700 down to sort of 200-300 feet at our lowest. We're typically sandy loam soils, normally very free draining. So deep profiles, good soils that drain easily. Over the last 10 years, so I returned home to the farm 10 years ago, full time. Met my wife, got married very, very quickly. It was great. And at the time, we were running a flock of 650 to 700 clean ewes. We had 70 to 80 breeding Tamworth Red Duroc sows and about 80 sucklers. And at the time, we were pushing the farm very hard to fulfill the needs of our on-farm butchery plant. Intuitively, I got the distinct sense that as time went on and margins in agriculture started to wane, capital costs going up, that I was going to have to start to reevaluate how we approached our land and our land management. Kind of, and totally ignorant. I had not a clue. I got a sense of where we needed to go, but didn't really have a clue at the time about agroecological, regenerative agriculture, grass only, pasture for life. I got thrust into pasture for life with a herd of Simmental cross cows at the time that couldn't really convert grass if I paid them to. There are other breeds out there, of course. And so our transition to agroecological, regenerative agriculture has been a bumpy one, but fundamentally focused at its core on farm resilience and business resilience with a long-term view. I came back to an industry that was, as a new entrant, that essentially saw me on the fringes of the Tweed Valley, surrounded by big arable, as an easy target to capitalize, an easy target to thrust new machinery at, an easy target for local nutritionists to come knocking at my door trying to sell me stuff I didn't need. And at the time, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and almost sunk it. Like, I genuinely realized pretty quickly into this that this wasn't how you made money in agriculture. And if this was how we were to farm, then it was a very dire prospect indeed. So we started to quite aggressively look at the system, and 2018 was a real eye-opener for the farm business. Beast from the East year. We were lambing ewes inside. I had upwards of 400 lambs in a building because we couldn't put them out. I dragged probably 200 dead lambs off the hill that spring. It was absolutely appalling. And I said, right, that's it. Sheep are gone. So we sold the flock. The same week the ewes went off, a herd of Angus, organic Angus cows plus calves in calf came on the market in Aberdeen. And so we went from 80 sucklers to 140 sucklers plus their replacement heifers overnight. This was quite an intuitive shift for me. I realized that my personal capacity to deliver was fairly compromised by running 3 species on 650 acres. Quite quickly after that, the breeding sows also went 2019. Our capacity to deliver that as well, we'd bitten off more than we can chew. And so I wasn't really in the mood for, chewing faster. So we decided to whittle that down and reevaluate how we were farming. Back then we were still housing. So 19, 20, 21, we were still housing. I was buying in 2,000 bales of straw a year in silo. We made about 2,500 bales of silage a year. For 150 cows plus all the followers, we were fairly heavily mechanized, tractor bedder, diet feeder, JCB telehandler, using probably 15 to 20,000 litres of diesel over a winter into the spring, cutting silage. And it slowly but surely dawned on me that it really wasn't going to work, but always had a vision. Over half the farm was unfenced at the time with no water infrastructure. So that was a fairly bumpy road to try and get the farm fenced and equipped with a vision to go completely outdoors, and with a fairly good grip of the figures as well. I had an idea of where this would lead us, and essentially it was going to be viable. I was going to be able to raise my family on 650 acres with money in the bank, which was kind of went against the grain in terms of what the industry was in for telling me was possible. Even my vet advised that it was an extremely bad idea to turf my cows out and graze only grass and feed them hay when only they ever needed it. And so I went, and in fact, at the time, my bank even said, please don't go nuclear with your change. We don't trust this is going to deliver for you. So knowing me and being quite impulsive, I just went and did it anyway. And so we went aggressively outdoors, and I've never looked back since. I guess that journey leading into where we are threw up some fairly significant issues that over the last 7 years I've fundamentally had to address really aggressively. One of them is genetics. And reviewing the type of animal and the type of landscape that I needed in order to deliver for my family what I said I was going to deliver on paper, and running some pretty technical cash flows to navigate our way through this transition, which everybody talks about as being expensive and difficult. It is expensive and it can be difficult. So I had to take a very big leap of faith. So having consulted with lots of people, including Heather and Philip and other breeders, I sort of stuck in place first and foremost a range of KPIs that I laid over the top of my breeding herd, and thought, if there's the best judge of this in this landscape and in this world of whether my cows can thrive in this landscape is God. So I call it God's share, right? And I thought, I'm just going to go and turf them out, and then I'm going to run these KPIs. I'm going to see what comes back and see which cows start to navigate this path of change effectively and which ones don't. Luckily enough, I was fairly blessed, actually, because most of the herd, having bought that previous herd well in 2018, that had a good foundation, most of the herd really had my back. And those that didn't, I whittled them out pretty quickly and replaced fast. So again, fairly big cash burden to the business. We kept a lot of replacement heifers. We grew the herd very fast and we culled heavily. And then in about 2023, we went calving all outdoors. And I bought no straw. And we cut our silage crop back by half. Still running the same number. So we were calving 150. Well, 150 went to the bull, calving about 147-ish. And so photograph number one, in rolls the calf catcher. Total game changer. That is my office. I spend most of my time in the spring in my buggy with my calf catcher and my children climbing over it somewhere. And then, so we went all outdoors. So the system that I run, having been fairly deprived of fencing, is, well, until 2023, when we were awarded a huge Nature Restoration Fund project to split all the fields on the farm down the middle, is I split all my bulling mobs down into equal halves. So if I bull a mob at 35 cows, because I'm quite particular in this transition of genetic reform of the herd, I like to know exactly who is going where, when, so I know exactly what crosses I'm running through, which sires are delivering which outcomes, and which are the cows and which maternal traits I'm trying to draw back. So I run bulling mobs at 35. I'll split those down into groups of 18, and each group will have about 9 to 10 acres to calve on. There is a reason for that. In the spring, we can be hit by very cold, very dry April and May, where the grass just doesn't grow ever. It's very cold and it just slows everything down. And when I was running larger mobs, full bulling mobs, even when I was housing indoors and I'd turn all the cows out, we could graze all the way through and have absolutely nothing under the cows after a full rotation. So, albeit my rotation was fairly rudimental back in the day, I would find myself being caught off guard with very few options other than to start to graze silage ground, hay ground, locked up, which I resisted. So those cold, dry springs, we mitigate by running very low stocking densities at calving time. Gives the cows loads of room to calve, and then I mob them back up pre-bulling, which when the bulls go out in June. So you can go on to the next slide there, Joe, please. So here we are. So calving, no leaves on the trees. We'll start calving middle of March, early April. Well, middle of March, early April. So they're starting calving now. And I'll talk about my first calf later on in this, which didn't go well. So calving, cows thrive. Normally it's dry and good. The cows get on well. And this is just an example of the calf catcher doing its thing. Crack on, Jamie, next slide. So here's a perfect example. This is one of my heifers last year calving. Behind her is one of the double fences that we built with the Nature Restoration Fund. And so on one side of the fence, I typically have to work my heifers quite hard in the spring. We find that East Coast grass growth can catch me off guard. The heifers put on too much fat and they condition too fast in the spring. So I run them on absolutely nothing, the heifers, on one side of the fence. As soon as they've calved, with a calf catcher, I chuck them through at the other side. So they condition up really quickly. So this is an example of me just making do with a system that at the moment is still pretty rudimental. So you can go to the next slide there, Jimmy. And so this just brings us through. So this is the same mob of cows. So these are the first calvers and going into last summer. So I'll bring it back to last year, and that's kind of the focus of this webinar, is over the resilience within the system and where I've tried to get it. My journey into the agroecological beef world is one of building as much resilience into my system as absolutely possible so that I can with confidence say to my family in the bank, look, I've got a handle on this and I can deliver what I say I'm going to deliver with a view to growing it. That then gives me, hopefully, the resilience to be able to navigate weather. And most farmers will say they spend their summers preparing for winter. Well, that's pretty true until last year, because our summer didn't provide what I needed to get to winter. We had from the 1st of January through till the 1st of June last year, we had 208 mil of rain fell on the East Coast. I mean, it was dry. Hay crop was back by almost a half. And so I had to, again, spread all the cattle out. The only way I was able to build winter covers was by locking them up all season. I was confident that if I had touched any of those covers between probably post-calving and when the first rains really started to arrive, which is August, if I touched those covers, I would have never got the regrowth on them to cover me for winter. So officially, I thought that 2018 was bad. Under sheep, it was really bad for me in 2018, but last year was exceptional. So we spread all the cows out, rotating them as fast as I could, but moving them through the paddocks to keep a lot of retention of moisture and cover. Again, I will reiterate, rudimental. I haven't got anywhere near as advanced system as Heather. It looks fantastic with all the paddocks. Next slide there, Jeremy. So this is where I'll bring it back to the genetics. I had to work the cows really hard last year. So going into the winter, reforming the herd and relying entirely on my cow's ability to deliver. The contrast from last year to this year is between the 1st of January this year and the 15th of February, we had 212 mil of rain, which is absolutely exceptional for the East Coast. So what I've learned about the agroecological journey and carrying larger covers of grassland and being very, very careful as to how we manage them, and everyone manages their systems differently based on what their infrastructure they have available, time, knowledge, all the above, is that it allows nature to do exactly what nature is designed to do, which is to provide a grazing resource for growing cattle, fundamentally, in my opinion, while also allowing nature to flourish underneath it. And so that lad in the picture behind you is one of our own homebred bulls. And I took a bit of a gamble a few years ago, and he's going over heifers. So that's a mob of heifers. And next slide, Jeremy. And keep moving on. And so this journey, this is me having a bit of fun, by the way, guys. I thought I'd throw that in for a bit of a laugh. That's what I do in the summer when I'm not herding cows, is playing on the horses in the arena. So, and this is part of the same journey, is moving the operating of the system where I can start using horses, which is why I don't like temporary fencing, because horses and temporary fencing don't tend to get on. But anyway, going back to the genetics of the herd, this is a good slide. So having the cows that can actually withstand that weather is absolutely fundamental to my focus. I haven't so much focused on the system in behind them, other than the fact that I've had a vision to get to where Heather is, hopefully. With cell grazing or mob grazing or amp grazing. It looks like amp grazing is the way I'm going to go. But I've spent an awful lot of time focusing on the cows that work to my landscape, not changing the landscape to work to the cows. So this pair in front of you, she's a second calver. That's her steer calf next to her. And if you roll over on the next slide, hopefully, if I'm right, yeah, right. That's the same cow on I think it would have been about the 15th of February, having just gone through that winter. So that is the absolute outcome. If I was to focus on one thing, ensuring that these girls can get through that winter with deferred grazing, making the most of our landscape, and converting the grass that we put in front of them is absolutely critical to the financial outcomes and the ability to deliver the margins that we need. Sadly, I had a real freak of an experience the other day, rolling hay out to my cows. That cow and another cow got gaseous bloat from hay in March. I've never seen it. My vet's never seen it. The other cow died. She went on her side, and sadly, she didn't abort her calf this morning, but her calf was born dead. So that was a great start to my calving season. I've never heard of bloat from hay before, rolling hay out to cows. But yeah, so that's a real shocker. But so there you have it. Visually, that's the outcome I'm looking for, is the type of animal that can deliver what we need. I think a lot of us would agree that genetics is absolutely critical. We can try and adjust the landscape and the system around these cattle all we want to try and generate more grass, be more effective. And I think that's critical to managing our grass. But if we don't have the girls to actually convert that grass, we're into a hiding. Next slide there, Jimmy. So just going back to the winter, this is a typical fairly early morning. You can just keep rolling through them with me, rolling bales out where I could find it. The fields were unbelievably wet. Here's me chucking bales out in the trees. We were sort of 70-mile-an-hour winds, wind chill down at probably about -4 at this time. We were probably still getting 50, 60 mil of rain coming through. Keep rolling on, Jeremy. And so what you'll notice, these paddocks should, in rotation, working on the residues, should be able to get me 3 or 4 rotations during the winter, because I'm grazing residue. So I'll fly them through, leaving a whole lot of residue on the ground. But what was ending up happening was these paddocks were getting blown out. So here's a slide, perfect example. Thank you, Jamie. Of that's putting cows into a brand new paddock. That's about 4 hectares. There's 60 or 58 cattle plus calves in that group. And next slide there, Jamie. There you get a better picture of the sort of grass they're going into, all looking pretty fit, calves looking great, very happy. It was absolutely pissing it down that day. And that was what the paddock looked like 24 hours later. So we were blowing through paddocks 75-80% quicker than I have ever even allocated or dreamed would happen. We're up on the hill. That's a very steep field. It doesn't look like it in the picture. It's very free draining, but we had so much rain that it was just paddling that quickly. And so this was testing my resilience and the resilience of the system to its absolute limit. And I just had to hope that the cows and the landscape were going to be able to hold this. And it was utterly exceptional. You can actually see snow off on the peaks of the hills in the background. So we're right up on the edge of the Tweed. Oh, that's actually the Eye Valley there. So it's extremely productive ground down in the valley. And I get looked at as a bit of an oddball, leaving grass all the way through to the winter. But I suppose, in essence, the journey that I've been on has been to try and design a system that, yeah, I've got a long way to go, but to design a system where I'm eliminating and removing as much volatility from the external market as I possibly can as a beef producer. Taking great inspiration from people who've been doing it far longer than I have in the agroecological, regenerative, rotational grazing, tall grass grazing dynamic. And what's becoming very apparent, albeit I've got a fair ways to go, is that it is delivering. My cows are looking pretty decent. I'm happy with them, despite the fact one of the hardest winters I've ever had to experience, going from the dry summer that we did all the way through to the wet winter, has pushed my system to its absolute limit. So, albeit I'm nowhere near as scientific or as advanced in my data recording as Heather, it would seem she's got a much more greater handle on the micromanagement of her grass. The fundamental fact of the matter is that agroecological grazing of cattle delivers resilience in not only the animal themselves, because eventually you'll end up with a herd, in my opinion, that can deliver it if we overlay KPIs onto the herd that start to draw out those traits that we need, and also to produce killing cattle from that system. But it generates margins in the finance on the figures that historically would never have been available. You know, the system that I was running 7 or 8 years ago, which is the system I was being encouraged to run, couldn't make any money. In fact, my 10-year prospect was absolutely dire. I was not going to be farming in 10 years unless I addressed it significantly and really grabbed the bull by the horns, despite the fact I haven't got any bulls with horns, but still. You cannot understand the sense of relief when I realized that the sort of systems I was benchmarking from, it wasn't just talk. It was real. It delivered. Cattle are healthier. Calves are superb. Landscape is holding up. Margin is increasing significantly. It's an absolute no-brainer. I suppose, having got my next phase of my infrastructure development, which is 5,000 meters of water pipe and 19 water troughs to put in this spring, let's see what it looks like once I get my amp grazing system really up and running. But for me, in terms of developing agroecological systems, it's rewarding for life. It's rewarding for us as individuals. I absolutely love it. I think Heather loves it too by some things. There's no better place to be than out with the cows grazing where they want to be. And yeah, it's wonderful. Keep going, Jamie. I think there's a final slide, is there?
No, I think that's you.
Actually, that is one thing I'm going to touch on. Anybody notice what's wrong with that hay? We'll ask that. Take a look at that hay and see if there's anything odd you can see about it. There's something that Stuart Mitchell will be able to pick up on as well if you ever get the chance to speak to Stuart about it. That hay was baled at around about 28 to 30%. And my contractor told me that I'd have a load of bales on fire, and it's a completely new way of making hay. That hay smells of molasses. It's absolutely extraordinary. Stuart Mitchell does the same thing, and it was by accident, and it's so sweet. The cows can't get enough of it. It's absolutely incredible. That's not the hay, by the way, they gave my cow bloats. But anyway, look, thank you for that, guys. I hope that was informative. I'm on a journey. Everybody is. I'm getting a huge reward out of it. It's good for me. It's good for my business. It's good for the cattle. Thank you very much.
Grand. Thank you both for going into so much detail in such a short period of time. We've got 15 minutes left, kind of marked out. So what I've done is I've kind of pulled together 2 photos from each of your presentations. Just wondering if you could kind of talk a bit about the contrast in weather that you've experienced and why it's so different from what you would call a traditional season.
Who's going to go first, Heather?
You go.
All right. I think whether we accept that we are living in the veil of anthropogenic climate change or cyclic change, everyone will accept we are facing significant change. The speed of the season change that for me and the weather that we experienced exposed great vulnerability throughout my summer into my winter. Having the ability to adapt and change the way we graze, I think is my sort of one piece of advice. That's what I've learned. I was always terrified of the holistic grazing, mob grazing styles of all when I was learning about this, which was quite rigid in my mind. I kind of perceived it to be quite rigid. You measure your grass here, you record it, you graze it, you move all the time. And I don't like being told what to do typically. So I just, I kind of naturally went down that route of being able to change quickly. So in this season, I had to change very rapidly, and move those cattle extremely quickly. It scared the bejesus out of me because I wasn't sure I was going to grass, but I was rewarded. So, Heather.
Did you have to bring bales in? Did you have enough? Did you have to
So actually,
did you have enough?
Yeah, good point. I did buy 40 bales more hay, like just 40 bales as an insurance policy. Most of them are still sitting there. I just wasn't sure if we were going to have, I mean, I've got 20 left. Put it into position, in sort of contrast. I was making 2,500 bales of hay for 110 adult cows or cattle. I got through last winter of 270 bales of hay. So just
yeah, we did really well.
It's a huge contrast. So yes, Heather, I did bring in a bit of hay, but I haven't used much of it.
That's not bad at all, though, because yeah. So we, for us, I think it's about you spoke about how you go around 3 or 4 times in a winter. You'd expect to be able to go around each field more than once. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that first winter, the one there that doesn't look that bad but was awful, I learnt that we can't go, well, for me planning, I like to have bases covered, and I wasn't, if we got that amount of rainfall that you've had there, or that you can see at the bottom there for that field, we weren't able to come back to that paddock. So rather than assuming we'd be able to come back to fields 2 or 3 times, I just now assume we can't. So I graze them as hard as we can, but still leaving quite a bit of grass behind when it's dry. And then if we do get to come back, that's brilliant, but I'm not expecting to be able to come back. And then we always have backup plans. We have bales in different positions around the farm. So if we need to, we can get them to anywhere on the farm. If the weather's awful, then we can get them out. You just have to have backup plans, basically. We haven't got a barn that we can put them in if we have to. We're opening up different bits of the woodland, more of the woodland, and that's really helpful actually. We have some windbreaks, so we've opened up some of those windbreaks, and not to graze, but to have the cows able to go back there as a run back. So they spend half their time on the grass and half their time in the woods, from what I've observed. So that's a lot less damage on the grass than the pasture than there would be otherwise. So I think it's being adaptable. It's using what resources that you have, planning as much as you can. But yeah, it's very much about having the right animals, as Angus was saying. We couldn't do it if these cows weren't used to our system, hadn't been selected by Dad over the years to work in the system. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, just quickly, one thing I will say on the moving of my cattle, my sort of thoughts and what I'm assuming is that you're not going to have that persistent weather in my system for longer than one rotation. So if let's say I've got 6 weeks to 8 weeks of a winter rotation across all my paddocks, and I've responded by lowering my stocking density significantly by opening up a lot of space for them, and I'm still able to fire through the cows. My assumption is that at some point in that rotation, the weather's going to stop being crap and it's going to dry up. Because in contrast, the paddock literally behind me, which in hindsight I should have taken a photograph of, you can kind of see it in the picture of those cows grazing the hay. They moved the following week into that other paddock, and I'm now carving on it, whereas I wouldn't carve on this one because it's so pitted. But just in the space of a week, it dried up enough.
You have those easterlies as well. Yeah,
it dries up so fast.
Everything's about your context, isn't it? But yeah.
100%. 100%.
I want the easterlies to come back. I'm missing them. I need them to grab it.
I suppose one of the things that you always sort of mentioned there, Angus, is that you can, if you're rotating 4 times throughout the winter over an area, and you have a period of bad weather for 4 or 6 weeks, it's not so bad. But when you've had such a long, horrible winter like we've had, you're constantly moving through really bad weather, so that is affecting your grass availability, so to speak.
Yeah, that's where the woodlands come in handy.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a kind of weather pattern that we're going to kind of expect more, is to have this prevailing wind for the east for 3 months on end. But it's definitely a big consideration.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pull out slightly about. I think these photos are taken at different times of year now that we've gone through the presentation. But I suppose the approach to grazing um, that you both take is similarly minded, but I guess, yeah, I suppose, Heather, you're talking about almost like a total graze kind of approach where you completely reduce the
We don't do
residue.
that so much now. We
Right.
were experimenting it with those couple of years. And in spring, I'm more likely to graze it tighter just because it's dry generally, and I'm holding the cows back a little bit just to make sure. But we don't do that. We did do total grazing for a couple of years, but now, well, we did the non-selective part of the total grazing, but we don't do it so often now.
Yeah.
These guys, so after calving, we have 6 weeks where they're on a skimming rotation before we go to bulling. So this is just basically to feed them up. The first time we managed this, their udders were leaking milk. They weren't used to having this much grass. The second year they were like, okay, this is normal, we're fine. But yeah, the first year they were overwhelmed, but they coped.
Yeah. And Angus, am I right in understanding that you wean very late? So you're actually running cows through winter with calves at foot?
Yeah.
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 When do
So,
you wean, Heather?
As do we. Yeah.
You do too. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you do that as well, Heather, do you?
Yeah, we wean in February, middle of
Oh, nice.
February.
Fantastic. Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
It's about when the cows are going to kick the calves off anyway, so it's a lot calmer for everyone then.
Yeah, 100%. It's extraordinary, actually. What my cows are about 0.25 of a score back, quarter of a score back, if not half a score back on where I would like them at this time of year because of the hard winter. None of them are looking horrendous by any means, but they are definitely, they're a bit back. But we've had so much rain, I anticipate grass cover to recover very fast this year. The landscape's still very wet. Well, not wet. There's a good moisture in the landscape. Grass is going to take off. It's nice and warm. Well, it's been nice and warm, so fingers crossed we're in a good one. But yeah, James, weaning in February, my cows essentially, they only get about 6 weeks off because they naturally start weaning much earlier. But historically, I think we underestimate the psychological impact on cattle of our behavior and our management, genuinely, and the impact that has on their well-being. I mean, you know how much stress makes us sick, right? So I think we underestimate the impact on our cattle. And I know that it was something I was going to explore with the ruminant revival team, was looking into this very specific point, because essentially I've eliminated all of my pre-winter vet and med by weaning in February. So this is the third year that I haven't had a case of pneumonia.
We found the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
I don't have any worms anymore in the young cattle. I don't worm so I do worm in the spring before they go out to the summer paddocks, but they only now get it once, whereas historically they might have got it twice, if not 3 times, depending on the way the system. Housing cattle is so dirty. My vet couldn't believe it. We did a contrast test about 3 years ago, on a batch of house cattle and a batch of cattle that had been out all winter, looking at all the various, we did bloods, looking at trace elements, looking at fact testing of worm counts, and the difference. The cattle in the sheds were riddled with worms. Their trace elements were very low. The guys on the hill that had been pissing around in the trees all winter had a great time. They were fit. The only thing that was slightly low on was selenium, but they had a very low worm count. They were fit, looking well. So, I think managing the cows is your critical element there, making sure the cows are catered for and they've got plenty of forage in front of them. And Heather, I'm sure you'll agree, these Angus types, or these types, there are other breeds out there, of course. We just like black cattle.
Herefords are also pretty cool.
Oh, they are pretty cool, yeah. This is why it's critical to have that animal that can manage that and maintain that diet. But if these Anguses don't require a huge amount of feeding. Good, reasonable hay and a good bit of deferred ground and a bit of cover, and they'll carry those calves all the way through the winter.
We noticed we bring them in around December for weighing, and we give them a bolus then. And the cows are very aware of where their calves are. And we would not, like a few years ago, we were weaning from October, then I think we went to December. They're very aware of where their calves are. But come February, when we separate them, they're like, it's time. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Hi,
The calves
bye.
have a bit of panic, but cows like, meh, we're done.
Well, yeah, they were fine. It's a big difference. And you talk about the stress levels, that is probably one of them, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also an argument, Heather, to be fair, and it's something to consider, is that the impact, if you're weaning early on the system, if you can graze those calves, for sure that would be fine. But I think where we've historically housed them and changing the microbial and bacterial sort of content of their guts and their rumens post wean and then pre-turnout in the spring. Last year, I didn't see any. Their recovery was unbelievable. Like they went straight from winter, weaned on a very early spring grass, and then as soon as we got April, May, they took off. Their growth rates just exploded. Whereas historically, where I'd been housing and turfing out, where they'd been having a silage whole crop diet or silage, the recovery period, the compensatory recovery was much slower. I think a lot, as their rumens and their bacteria sort of took time to change, it was quite fascinating. So it's an interesting dynamic, for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. It's almost 1:15, so I'm just conscious of time. If anyone has any questions, who's kind of listening in today, feel free to sort of ask them now. Otherwise, we'll sort of kind of wrap up the meeting. Or indeed, if you have any questions at all that pop up later on today when you're still kicking around, do email and I can pass them on to Angus and Heather. But I think we're all good. You've both been very engaging, so I think you've got a stunned silence, which is what we like. It's great. So we'll wrap up the webinar there. Just want to say thank you both very much for presenting. It's been really interesting for me, and I suspect also for everyone who's attended. The kind of legacy output of this webinar is we'll have the recording to kind of stick up on the SAP website, which is kind of tied to the Soil Association website. So it'll be a good resource to link people to in future, for those who weren't able to attend today. But yeah, so thanks very much everyone who's attended. If just like I'll let you all go and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Yeah, no worries, folks.
Thanks, Jamie. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Heather. Good to see you.
See you, Angus.
You too. Take care. Have a good carving.
Yeah, you too. Hope it was a bit better.
Hopefully it's smoother than today, I'll tell you. That would be a good start.